Do the Baltimore Ravens have the best secondary in the NFL? We talk about that and more next here on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we return here with another episode of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire. Of course, we're here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. We're free and available on all platforms. And we're back here with a Thursday edition episode. A ton to talk about here today, as obviously the Ravens a couple days ago signing cornerback Kyle Fuller, a move that I think completes the secondary. And we'll talk about the secondary in the second part of our show, diving into if I think the Ravens secondary is the best in the NFL and if the Ravens do have that top unit throughout all of the league. A lot of good teams out there with good secondaries, but we'll dive into that in the second part of our show. It'll be almost like an OTA sandwich here today, because in the first segment, we'll be talking a bit about Lamar Jackson and his, decision to not show up to the first couple days of OTAs on Tuesday and on Wednesday, and then just diving into that decision and what his teammates, what some coaches had to say about it, and what my overall thoughts are on the entire situation. And then in the final part of the show, we'll go back to OTAs, look at some quotes and some takeaways that people who were at OTAs had to say about it. So yeah, that OTA sandwich type feeling where it's OTA's first segment with Lamar Jackson, OTA's third segment with quotes and takeaways. Then sandwiched in the middle there is secondary talk about the Baltimore Ravens. So without any further ado, let's dive into the content. But actually first, if you're here with us in video form so you can see my face and my background, be sure to subscribe to this channel, like the video. It helps me out a ton. Our next goal here on Locked On Ravens on YouTube is 2,000 subscribers. We're hoping to get there, at least I am, before the season starts. So if you've already subscribed, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate you and appreciate that. And if you're thinking about it, you're wondering why should you subscribe? We put out daily Ravens content 5 days per week. So if you want Ravens news, analysis, updates, anything relating to the team 5 days per week, you have it right here. So I'd personally say subscribe. I might be a little biased, but that's okay. Also, though, we are in audio form. So if you're here with us in audio form, I greatly appreciate you as well. Be sure to follow us, turn notifications on so you know when our content comes out. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at KOstriker34 and the Locked On Ravens account at Locked On Ravens. So without any further ado, now let's dive into the content, starting off with Lamar Jackson. And with this being a Thursday edition episode, the news of Lamar Jackson not being at OTAs dominated the news cycle for Baltimore, I think, on Wednesday in particular. And it was, I think, something that a lot of people were kind of disappointed with, in the fact that they want him to show up and be a leader and, take that accountability and be there with his teammates. And look, my stance on the whole thing is that I do believe he should be there. I think it's important for him to be there, but OTAs aren't mandatory. They're voluntary OTAs. So I'm not necessarily going to take the sky is falling approach with this, whereas, Lamar Jackson hasn't shown up to OTAs, the Ravens aren't winning a Super Bowl. I don't think that's what this is. But you'd like to have him there, because I think the practice time is very important. There's a new center in town, obviously, with Tyler Linderbaum, and I think Jackson getting reps with him is very important. And it's interesting, I'd say, because Lamar Jackson is one, especially we've heard the quotes of him saying that he really values getting together with his teammates in the offseason, getting those reps in, and he thinks that's important. So, you're thinking, well, what better time to start that off with? You got organized team activities. We're able to get in the building with the guys, meet the new players, and get those reps on the field. Now, we don't really know a ton about the situation right now. John Harbaugh, during his press conference yesterday, did say that, he's going to let Lamar Jackson speak for himself. He said it's not his place to comment on that type of thing, and that, he wants Lamar Jackson to speak for himself on that. And those were like eerily similar comments to what he said about Ben Mason when Mason signed with New England's practice squad. Obviously, different situations. I'm not saying that, John Harbaugh was super, super upset or anything, but I'm sure that the team wants him there, right? I'm sure that John Harbaugh wants him there. And so we don't know whether this is a situation of there's something personal going on with Lamar Jackson, or is he sick, or is there something behind the scenes here that we just don't know about, and that's why he's not here in Baltimore at the moment, but then he'll show up next week or something. Like maybe that's the situation, but if it's the other side of that where it's he's saying to himself, oh, well, I don't really want to go and I'm just going to work here and do that, well, then I think it's a different story, and people will say, well, why didn't you come together with the teammates? And Mark Andrews talked about it. He said that he's not worried about it, and everything is, for him, the sky's not falling either. Marlon Humphrey talked about it. He also, he said he talked to Lamar, and he said that he'll be something about a timeline. I'm not exactly sure what that meant, but he knows there's something when Lamar's going to come to Baltimore. So I don't know whether he meant that's OTAs or that's training camp or whatnot, but both those players kind of echoed the same sentiments of like, look, they know how hard of a worker Lamar Jackson is. They're not necessarily worried about it. But Marlon Humphrey did say, look, if it was training camp, it would be bad. And I mean, yes, training camp is mandatory, right? You kind of have to be there during training camp or else it signals a holdout. This is not necessarily signaling a holdout from Lamar Jackson. I don't think I'd be shocked if it got to that point during training camp. I don't think this is about that, honestly, but you'd like to have him there. I think it's, again, important to get those reps. And this is for a player that didn't necessarily have all the practice time in the world during the 2021 season, when he was sick, and he obviously missed not a lot of the year, but he missed the back half of the year with the ankle injury. So to get all that practice time in is very, very important. But it's not just like Lamar Jackson has been sitting, lounging around, doing nothing all offseason, right? He has been working. He has been getting better. He has been trying, working on his mechanics as we've heard about. And Jackson is working to get to be a better player. And that's what a lot of his teammates are doing now in Baltimore. It's just that he's not there working with the first team. Marquise Brown no longer in Baltimore. Lamar Jackson and Rashad Bateman didn't really have a ton of time to establish a connection on the field in Baltimore that they have worked out together during the offseason and kind of established, I think, a bit more something than what they had. But yeah, I mean, it'd be awesome if he was there, and it'd be great if he was participating with his teammates. But there's not enough that I know about the situation right now where I'm ready to say, well, this is a disaster. And honestly, even if he doesn't show up because he doesn't want to, the guys aren't required to be there. Now, I think that as a quarterback and as a leader of the team and someone who was not in his 15th year, let's say, or who's 10 plus years in this league, like Calais Campbell, for example, though that makes a little more sense, right? But I think for Jackson, it is important to be there. But again, I'm not gonna crucify him for his decision to not be there if it is just, in fact, he doesn't want to be at OTAs, because again, it's voluntary, right? He doesn't have to show up. Nobody, in fact, has to show up to OTAs. So that is his decision, what he's doing right now, whether he shows up today or shows up next week or shows up in 2 weeks or doesn't show up at all. That's his decision. And, people might be saying, oh, you're going back and forth on this. Well, no, I mean, look, my stance is I think you should be there. I think that it's very important. All reps, every day. This isn't just in football. I mean, every day is a new opportunity to get better in some way, shape, or form, right? And when you have OTAs like this, where you're able to get together with coaches, get together with teammates, kind of establish connections and stuff, every rep is super important. So I think that it is important for him to be there. But this isn't like all of a sudden Lamar Jackson isn't a hard worker. He's not doing stuff to better himself on the football field and obviously off of it too, right? This isn't like all of a sudden he is shifted to, well, yeah, now he's a lazy person who isn't getting better. That's not what this is. And that's what his teammates echoed in terms of, they know how hard of a worker Lamar Jackson is. We all know how hard of a worker Lamar Jackson is. So is it a bit unfortunate that he's not there at the moment, at least at the time of this recording? Sure, right? Yeah, I feel that way. I think he should be there. But at the same time, I'm not going to, again, just lay into him from being like, this is awful, Lamar Jackson, this is terrible. Like, I'm not going to do that because, again, keyword here is voluntary. OTAs are voluntary. He's not required to be there. So at the end of the day, that is, again, his choice, his decision. I don't see any downsides to it outside of, like, of course, like the very, very minor chance I'd say that there is an injury. That's with all players, though, in practices. I wouldn't anticipate anything crazy going on there, though. Or if something personal is going on, or if he's sick, then it makes a little more sense. And then he comes in next week or something. I'm thinking, okay, that makes a little more sense. But again, Lamar Jackson not at OTAs on Wednesday and causing, I think, quite the stir throughout Ravens Nation, or the Ravens flock, I would say. But yeah, we'll see how it ends up going, if he ends up showing up in the middle of OTAs or just doesn't show up altogether. So a situation to monitor, I'd say. But again, the sky is not falling. I am not necessarily worried, but I do think it would be beneficial for him to be there, I'll say. We'll head into our first break here now, though, on Locked On Ravens. Still a ton to talk about. When we get back, we'll be diving into if the Ravens have the best secondary in the NFL, so be sure to stay tuned. Still a ton to talk about here, but first, I do want to tell you a bit about Built Bar. And there have been a lot of things asked about Built Bar, and they delivered this time with Built granola bars. They're here, and they come in 3 unbelievable flavors. You have chocolate peanut butter, chocolate coconut, and white chocolate berry. And if you want to try all 3 of those, you can actually get a mixed box of them now at Built.com. And there are also so many different flavors of bars and puffs as well. It doesn't go just with those granola bars. You have so many options to choose from. With 150 calories, 15 grams of protein, and only 4 grams of sugar, though, the Built granola bars will change your world. They've cracked the code to better granola. They're the perfect healthy snack to pack in your lunch, take on the road, or eat as a snack. So head over to Built.com right now. Get the Built granola bars and those 3 delicious flavors to try again. Chocolate peanut butter, chocolate coconut, and white chocolate berry. So don't miss out on that. Go to Built.com. Use promo code LOCK15. Get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. And we return here with our second segment of Locked On Ravens here on Thursday. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still here with you. Again, thank you for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. Be sure to subscribe to us here on YouTube and follow us if you're here with us in audio form. And also be sure to make your second listen Locked On Sports today. But now let's talk about the Ravens secondary, because again, I'm still over the moon about the Kyle Fuller signing. I think it's one with his versatility to play inside and outside. It adds an element to the secondary that is very important in that veteran leadership, the missing piece, I would say. So when looking at everything in all secondaries throughout the NFL, looking at depth, looking at star power, looking at veterans and young guys and everybody fully healthy, the question that I'm going to pose is, do the Ravens have the best secondary in the NFL? Now, there are a lot of teams that can contend for this title. I think Baltimore is right up there. I'm going to say my top 3 secondaries right now, and then we'll kind of break them down and even look at a couple of the ones outside of this. But I think I'm going to go with, in no particular order, you have the Chargers, you have the Packers, and you have the Ravens. I think those are my top 3 secondaries right now at this moment. You can make arguments for teams like Cleveland. You can make arguments for other ones as well. There are a few other, the Bills are up there. You have the Saints, who I think are very talented. They're probably my number 4. The Broncos have some talented players in there. But I think that for me, the top 3, even if you want to go top 4, let's go top 4. I think no particular order again. You have Chargers, Ravens, Saints, and Packers. Those are my top 4 secondaries in the moment. And you're looking at them and you're thinking, well, all right, let's look at those 4. What distinguishes them? I think the thing that I look at, which is very important, fully healthy, is star power and depth. You obviously can have great young guys with a ton of potential, but we're talking about right now. And so for a player like, Jalen Armour-Davis, who has potential, but we're not talking about the player he's going to be in 3 years or 4 years. We're talking about who he is now. He's not going to have as big of an impact on the secondary this season than a Kyle Fuller would, let's say. Now, the Packers, they just signed Jair Alexander to a huge extension. They have Eric Stokes. They have Rasul Douglas as well. And obviously the safety duo there of Adrian Amos and Darnell Savage. They are a very deep team. But you look at the Saints too. They just signed Tyrann Mathieu to replace Marcus Williams. They brought in Marcus May as well. Marshawn Lattimore, obviously one of the best corners in this game. Then you have the Chargers, Derwin James. They get J.C. Jackson. They have Asante Samuel. They are all very talented. But you look at what the Ravens have. We talked about it yesterday. If you haven't checked out that show, my Kyle Fuller reaction show, I recommend you do so. But Baltimore, top 6 wise in that secondary. 3 corners, 3 safeties. The 3 corners are Marlon Humphrey, Marcus Peters, Kyle Fuller. The top 3 safeties are Marcus Williams, Chuck Clark, and Kyle Hamilton. That is incredible. Plus, you have the depth below that. You have a solid veteran in Tony Jefferson. You have an up-and-coming player in Geno Stone. Cornerback, it's a bit more shaky. Jalen Armour-Davis is there. You also have other guys like Demarion Williams and a few others who are kind of on the lower end of the depth spectrum, I would say. But I think what the worry was for me with the cornerback position before Kyle Fuller was, let's say that Marcus Peters isn't ready until week 7 or week 4, or isn't ready to go full strength in week 1. Who are you trusting to put in there? Well, are you going to have to use Brandon Stevens outside, or put Darius Washington in the slot? Or is Lamar-Davis going to have some significant snaps early on? I think the Ravens answered that question with Kyle Fuller, and it literally is like you take this puzzle piece and you fit it right in. I think this was the missing piece in the secondary. Now, looking at the star power of other teams, I mean, you could classify, I mean, Marlon Humphrey's a star, Marcus Peters is a star, Chuck Clark, not a star. I mean, Marcus Williams, I think, is a star in my opinion. I mean, he's one of the best young safeties in this game. Kyle Hamilton, I'm not going to classify him as a star right now because he hasn't shown anything at the NFL level yet. But we could be talking at the bye week and saying, oh yeah, this dude's already a star. And I think by the end of his first season, he's going to be a star at this level. But just because he hasn't taken a snap yet, I'm going to put him in the very good category, but not a star, an NFL star yet, because he hasn't played a snap yet. So I do want to be fair in that regard. But the Packers are deep and they have stars. I mean, Jair Alexander, we've talked about, one of the best. He's up there with Marlon Humphrey in terms of top corners, top 5 corners in this league. Rasul Douglas had a out of nowhere season for them, and they were able to get him back. They have Eric Stokes, too, a very good young cornerback. And then you have, again, the safety duo of Darnell Savage, and you also have AJ Amos. So you have the Maryland guys, AJ Amos being from Maryland, and Darnell Savage, he played at Maryland. So you have star power there. The depth, they have it, but I don't know. I feel like I trust Baltimore's depth a tiny bit more, even though I know Baltimore's depth, I wouldn't say is perfect below Kyle Fuller at corner. I still think that, 3 for 3 looking at corners. You have Marcus Peters, Marlon Humphrey, Kyle Fuller. You have Jair Alexander, Eric Stokes, Rasul Douglas. I think that maybe it's really close, honestly. I think it might be Ravens by like 0.01%. I could see arguments for the Packers and kind of swinging that. I mean, it swings back and forth for me. But I think the over-the-top thing is the safeties. Darnell Savage, Adrian Amos, 2 very good players, but the Ravens have 3 very good players. And I mean, a full player over another team there where you can say, look, these are 6 players we can trust on the field right away. The Packers, I think, have 5 of those guys right now. And yeah, I think for me, that's where I would say, all right now, if we're just doing Ravens and Packers, Ravens would be 1, Packers would be 2. Chargers in there, you have star power, J.C. Jackson coming over on that huge contract. Derwin James, we all know he's one of the best safeties in this league. I mean, the key for him is health. And then Asante Samuel Jr., who was just, an absolute steal of a pick by them. Just one of the better players to come out of that draft class. And he's shown it over the course of his very, very young career. But again, where's the depth for them? I think that the Ravens still have that. And I'm gonna take, because we saw firsthand just how important depth is. And I'm not saying that, fully healthy Tony Jefferson's going to get 90% of snaps. That's not how it works, right? You play your stars, but the Ravens can utilize their top 6 guys in so many different ways. For the Chargers, I just don't think have that. And that's where I'm going to go with that. So I think for me, it's Ravens 1, Packers 2, and Chargers 3, which leaves me with the Saints. And the Saints brought in that safety duo of Tyrann Mathieu and Marcus May. Marshawn Lattimore is obviously there, and he's one of them. He's in that conversation too in the top 5 cornerback. They have a lot of guys too. But again, Marshawn Lattimore, Marlon Humphrey, I think if you want to use them as like cancelers, you can. I think Marcus Williams at this stage is right up there with Tyrann Mathieu. I'd probably favor Marcus Williams just a hair in Baltimore system. And it does come down to system too. Like I don't want it to be, well, we're going to compare everybody in the same system. Each system is different. Each player fits differently in each system. But I think when looking at Marcus May, I think Kyle Hamilton is a lot better of a player. And again, he hasn't played a snap yet, so we don't know, but I have a very good feeling about that. Chuck Clark also, I think, is a better player than Marcus May. I know they are different players, but then you look at the other depth there, and the secondary that New Orleans has is very, very formidable. Don't get me wrong, but I think at the end of the day, when looking at just who each team has depth-wise, and you can't get out Denver. Denver has Pat Surtain, and you have in Indianapolis as well with Stephon Gilmore. But again, you're looking at the depth, and also Philadelphia with James Bradbury and obviously Darius Slay in there. I think, are two guys in Miami. I mean, Miami has Xavier Howard, Byron Jones, Javon Holland. And so, I mean, Miami for me, I think is number 5. But again, I just think also Cleveland is probably number 6 with Denzel Ward and Greg Newsome. And they had hopefully Grant Delpit can bounce back for their sake. So I think for me, in terms of best secondaries in the league, this isn't like one team blows the other out of the water. I think it is a list that is very interchangeable. You can say, well, this team has this guy, and that's what puts them over the top for me. But someone else could say, well, this team has these 2 guys, and that's where I think they're better. So it's not like if we're on a 10-point scale, the Ravens would be at 10, and then the Packers at 2 would be at like 7. No, this is like if the Ravens were 10, the Packers would be like 9.7, and then like the Chargers would be 9.4 or something. Like this is a very close scale to me. But let's say it. Let's do it. I'm going to say the Baltimore Ravens have the best secondary fully healthy. Obviously, if Marcus Peters goes down and Marcus Williams goes down, knock on wood, they don't, obviously. But if that happens, then it's a whole different ballgame. But fully healthy, you have very good players overall, star power-wise. You have the depth that goes beyond the top 6, which I think is very important. And you can trust a lot of that depth, too, where it's not like you're having guys playing 8 spots up on the depth chart anymore, right? You have players who it's not Kevon Seymour as the number 2 corner. It's not Anthony Averett as number 1, fully healthy. You have Marlon Humphrey as your number 1. That's pretty good. Marcus Peters number 2. That's pretty good. So going down that list there, I mean, my secondary rankings, I think Baltimore is number 1. I think Green Bay is a very, very, very close number 2, followed by the Chargers at number 3, the Saints at 4, the Dolphins at 5, and the Browns at 6. And there's a lot of debate that goes into it too. And I know not everyone's going to agree with me that the Ravens have the best secondary in the league. And it's something where I went back and forth on it, but I settled on the conclusion that I feel confident enough in their depth and their star power to say that they do. So maybe a hot take, maybe not. I don't know, but it's my take. That's my opinion on the whole matter. But again, one signing here, one signing there can really change the whole nature of things. And I'm not saying that, oh, well, Kyle Fuller is going to be this first team all-pro player, but it's just a matter of fit for each team. I think when you're looking at Green Bay, looking at the Chargers, looking at the Saints, whoever, it's a matter of how each player fits on the defense. I think the Ravens made a great signing with Kyle Fuller, and it was a piece added that I think just gives them trustable depth at this point at both cornerback and at safety. Now, if Chuck Clark gets traded, we're having a different conversation, I feel like. But for now, the Ravens have all those guys. So I'm going to go with the Ravens do, in fact, have the best secondary in the NFL in a very, very, very close race. We'll head into our final break here. When we get back, we'll be diving into some OTA quotes from players and coaches, also some takeaways from people who were there for the Ravens on Wednesday. So be sure to stay tuned. Still a ton to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. Welcome back in our final segment here of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Ostreicher, your host, still here with you. And again, thank you for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube here, like this video, and also be sure to make your second listen Locked On NFL. A ton of great stuff going on over on that channel. So be sure to subscribe, check out some of that content over there. I have some videos on there if you want to check me out and hear me talk for an extra 30 minutes on there. Well, let's talk about some of the takeaways here from OTAs and the Wednesday session of OTAs. And there were some media members there who were able to get a look at some of these guys. And so Jeff Rubik at The Athletic said that some of the guys that he did not see outside of Lamar Jackson include the injury recovery players. So like J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, David Ajabo, Marcus Peters, Tyus Bowser, some of those guys. But then you also have other guys like Nick Boyle, Jawan James, Morgan Moses, Ronnie Stanley, Jalen Ferguson, Kyle Fuller, Ardarius Washington, Marcus Williams, Iman Marshall, Michael Pierce, Calais Campbell, Derek Wolfe. So that's where the absences were. But Morgan Moses practiced on Tuesday. He was there on Tuesday, not there on Wednesday. So it is very fluid. This episode being recorded on a Wednesday night. So Thursday, maybe Lamar Jackson shows up, or next week, maybe Lamar Jackson shows up. So again, the fluidity of guys being there, not being there, it is pretty fluid overall. But John Harbaugh agreed with me and said that Kyle Fuller completed the secondary in his mind, and he didn't rule out any other additions, but he's pretty good with what they have overall. And he said that, again, Marcus Peters is there in the building and rehabbing and doing well. So, I mean, I've been saying it for the past couple of days. I think Kyle Fuller does complete this secondary, and looking at it, I think that he's the perfect fit for him. So I'm glad that John Harbaugh agreed there. But a big important player who was participating in something we talked about a bit in the second segment there was Chuck Clark. Obviously, a bit of uncertainty surrounding his situation, but John Harbaugh said that it was important to participate in OTAs for Chuck Clark. We talked a bit about the Mark Andrews comments about Lamar Jackson, saying that he knows how hard he's been working and he isn't worried about the absence of Jackson. And that kind of ties back into our first segment conversation. But Andrews also said that it's scary how much talent the Ravens have in their tight end room. And he also said he worked out with Nick Boyle this offseason in Arizona and said that Boyle looks like a different person. And that's really good to hear, because obviously with Boyle last year, couldn't really get on the field, and he was on and off and on and off. And he's an important part of what they do. And with Eric Tomlinson no longer in Baltimore, he's now with Denver. The Ravens don't have that pure blocking tight end. And I'm not saying Eric Tomlinson is Nick Boyle. The Ravens missed Nick Boyle on the field. So I hope that he can be able to bounce back and be the player that I think everybody knows that he can be and that he's shown. But Marlon Humphrey talked about how Marcus Williams will be at OTAs next week. So again, the fluidity of just guys being there 1 week, not being there the next, or not being there the first week, being there the rest of the time. This is, again, it's voluntary. Guys don't have to be there the entire time, and guys don't have to be there at all if they don't want to. I think, again, reps are important. And so Marcus Williams being there, I think, is going to be huge for him, especially being one of the new guys in that secondary. And also, Marlon Humphrey said turnovers will be the name of the game. He looked at the Ravens 2000 defense, said he's inspired by that group. And yeah, the Ravens have been I'd say a very inconsistent turnover team over the past couple of seasons, where, you look to Marlon Humphrey's forced fumbles, but interception wise, they missed that with Marcus Peters last year and his ball hawking ability. So if they can get some of those turnovers, forcing some fumbles in the front seven, and obviously with Humphrey and some of those other guys, that fruit punch is contagious. We saw it with Marcus Peters. I hope that can be something that ends up going really, really well for them. But yeah, a couple of good quotes there from players, and obviously John Harbaugh talking a bit about how he wants Lamar Jackson to speak for himself on the whole not holdout situation, but him not being at OTAs again. I don't think we're going to do a holdout. I wouldn't necessarily worry about that whatsoever. But also, when looking at takeaways, Jeff Rebeck did say that Kyle Hamilton looked very impressive. He fared well in one-on-ones against tight ends. He breaks some balls quickly, very aggressive coming forward. I mean, this is music. This is music to my ears. I mean, we all know, I think there's something in a lot of people listening here, and myself as well, that Kyle Hamilton just has that X factor, that star ability. And to be able to get off to a strong start. I mean, some rookies don't, right? Some rookies struggle during OTAs, the first practices against their teammates, and Kyle Hamilton, it feels like he just hasn't skipped a beat, showed it on the tape in college. Hopefully, again, very early on, we'll be able to show it in the pro so that I can put that NFL star on him. But again, I don't want to do that to any rookie who hasn't played any snaps. But I feel like pretty quickly we're going to get to that point with Kyle Hamilton for sure. But Jeff Rebeck also saying the Ravens had a lot of drops on Wednesday, and Brandon Stevens seems to be playing cornerback, although John Harbaugh did say that they'll continue to move him around a little bit. Vince Beagle, the Ravens' new addition, can play both inside and outside, played mostly at outside linebacker. Kevon Seymour had a nice practice as well. So, yeah, there were some drops from Rashad Bateman, it looked like, from what I read, and James Prochet had one as well. But, again, I think that as the practices go on, as guys get back into pure football shape while working with the team, these things will get ironed out. You don't want to see the drops at all. I think that's something that, has to get ironed out pretty quickly. You don't want to put your team in that situation offensively, of course, but Ravens are set up well. I think, again, these OTAs are very important, and I'm glad that a lot of guys are there. Tyler Beatty also had a very nice day, had a nice one-handed catch, apparently, so that's great to hear. And yeah, for me, Tyler Beatty is my number 3 guy on this roster right now. I don't really see that changing. I think if the Ravens keep 4 running backs, Mike Davis is probably the guy for them there, but they have options at running back. They have options at tight end. They have options at a lot of different positions, and of course, secondary too. We talked about that unit that I think is just going to be so stellar this year. So as OTAs go on, as the practices go on, as training camp comes up, the preseason, and obviously going into the regular season, I think Baltimore will be able to clean up a lot of those mistakes. But over the first couple of days, it's natural, right? I'm not saying this guy's falling as the Ravens receivers had a tough day with drops. I think it's all right overall, but it's good to hear some of the rookies stepping up early on. It's funny enough, the ones who got the most hype were the first pick of their draft with Kyle Hamilton and the last pick of their draft with Tyler Beatty. So two players who I think can make impacts. Hamilton, I think, on more of in more of a grand role than Beatty, but Beatty more of an underrated player who knows with Dobbins and Edwards just where those injuries are going to go, if they're ready, if they want to scale that back a little bit. So yeah, I think for Baltimore, they have plenty of options overall. It was nice to hear a little update from players, from coaches, and just seeing some takeaways from players or people who were there, media members who were there. So I'm excited for this team. It was great to see a little glimpse of just what they've been doing so far. And the Ravens will have a couple more weeks of OTAs, and we'll see what ends up happening there and some of the things that people see who are at the OTAs. But that's all I have for you today here on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in. When we get back in tomorrow, we'll be diving into more Ravens talk to round out the week. So be sure to stay tuned for that, and I will see you tomorrow.